There's a reason the Sanji vs Zoro debate will never end. It's not because the answer is unclear, it's because the question is usually wrong. One Piece doesn't treat Sanji and Zoro as rivals in growth, it treats them as opposites in design. One is written to change, the other is written to endure. And once you recognize that distinction, their arcs stop competing and start revealing something much deeper about how character development actually works. This video isn't about surface level comparison, it's about what changes and what doesn't. Who is meaningfully different now than they were at the beginning of the story? Who has confronted themselves and who has never needed to? By applying clear, objective criteria to both characters, we're going to answer a question the story itself has already settled. Not emotionally, not nostalgically, but factually. Before we compare Sanji and Zoro, we need to lock something down, because most debates fall apart right here. Character development is not power growth. It's not new techniques, it's not bigger moments, and it's definitely not consistently mistaken for depth. At its core, character development is about internal change over time. For this video, we're using 3 clear factual criteria. First, internal conflict. Does the character struggle with who they are, what they believe, and what they're becoming? Development ensures tension between identity and action. Second, transformation. Is there a measurable before and after state? Can we point to a version of the character early in the story and say that person could not exist this way now? Then third, value reorientation. Do the character's priorities, fears, and sense of self meaningfully shift as a result of the story's events? This matters because a character can be deep without being developed. A character can be consistent without being static, and a character can be mythic without undergoing change. So this comparison isn't about who is better written in general. It's about who moves internally and who remains deliberately unmoved. Once we apply this criteria honestly, the debate stops being emotional and starts being measurable. From the moment Sanji is introduced, his sense of self is built around usefulness and restraint. He feeds the hungry, protects women at any cost, and sacrifices himself quietly. Early Sanji believes his value lies in what he can endure for others, not who he is. That belief is shattered in Whole Cake Island. For the first time, Sanji is forced to confront the origin of his self-erasure, the Vinsmoke family. The abuse, the genetic modification, the cold equation of power over emotion. All of it explains why Sanji clings so desperately to kindness and control. His refusal to fight women, his willingness to be hurt rather than hurt others, isn't just chivalry, it's resistance. He is terrified of becoming what his bloodline represents. But Whole Cake doesn't resolve that fear, it exposes it. The real transformation comes in Wano. When Sanji's Gemma enhancements awaken, he faces an impossible choice: accept power at the cost of humanity or reject it at the risk of becoming irrelevant. This is a genuine identity crisis. For the first time, Sanji is afraid of himself. He doesn't ask if he can win, he asks if he should exist this way at all. What matters is how this resolves. Sanji doesn't reject his power outright, nor does he surrender to it. He chooses. He accepts strength while reaffirming his values, trusting others to stop him if he ever loses himself. That trust, that willingness to be vulnerable, is new. By the current point in the story, Sanji operates without that internal fracture. The fear is gone. The question is answered. Sanji doesn't just gain power. He redefines who he is allowed to be. That is textbook character development, conflict transformation and resolution, all visible on the page. Unlike Sanji, Zoro is introduced already formed. From his first appearance, his identity is anchored to a single, unshakable principle. Strength is the price of honor, and ambition demands sacrifice. Zoro does not question his belief. He lives inside it. That's important because Zoro's story is not about change. It's about confirmation. Moments like Thriller Bark are often cited as development, but they are better understood as revelation. When Zoro silently takes Luffy's pain and says nothing happened, he isn't becoming someone new. He is exposing the full extent of who he already is. His loyalty, his willingness to die quietly, and his belief that his life is expendable in the service of his captain were always present. This is simply the moment the story makes them undeniable. Wano deepens this further. Enma doesn't force Zoro to confront his identity. It tests whether he is worthy of it. The blade responds not to doubt, but to resolve. Zoro doesn't need to reorient his value to wield it. He needs to commit to them completely. His fight against Kaido reinforces this philosophy. Strength is not about lineage or cruelty, but about conviction sharpened through hardship. Now, in the current phase of the story, Zoro's role continues to reflect inheritance rather than transformation. He embodies an ideal, the warrior who walks towards death without hesitation. Where Sanji wrestles with who he might become, Zoro has already decided. This doesn't make Zoro shallow, it makes him mythic. Zoro's arc is about becoming the clearest possible version of an already defined ideal. He doesn't develop by changing internally. He develops by proving again and again that his ideology can withstand any test. That distinction matters because consistency is not the same thing as character development, even when it's written beautifully. When you place Sanji and Zoro side by side, the difference in their narrative design becomes impossible to ignore. Sanji's story is defined by movement. He begins the series unsure of his worth beyond service. He fears his own nature. He rejects parts of himself to protect others. Across the story, those fears are challenged, broken open, and ultimately resolved. By the current point in the manga, Sanji is not asking the same questions he once did. His internal landscape has changed. His relationship with power, identity, and vulnerability has fundamentally shifted. Zoro's story is defined by continuity. He begins the series with a rigid code, an absolute goal, and a clear understanding of what strength demands. The story never asks him to reconsider those values. It asks him to carry them further, deeper, and closer to death. Each major moment doesn't alter Zoro's beliefs, it validates them. His arc is not about internal struggle, but about external testing. This is where most debates go wrong. Fans often mistake emotional intensity for development. Zoro has some of the most powerful moments in the series: sacrifice, loyalty, endurance. But those moments do not create internal change. They reinforce a philosophy that was already complete. Sanji, by contrast, experiences contradictions. He hesitates. He fears himself. He asks for help. He changes how he understands his own humanity. That change is measurable. You can point to a Sanji who existed before Whole Cake Island and Wano and confidently say that version of him could not exist now. So when the question is framed honestly, not emotionally, not nostalgically, the distinction becomes clear. Zoro represents ideological perfection and Sanji represents psychological evolution. Both are excellent writing choices, but only one fulfills the technical definition of character development.